Tuesday, the 31st of October. Aha, it's Halloween. Atlassian has issued patches to some high severity vulnerabilities in the server versions of their Confluence solution. So all versions of Confluence are susceptible to one of these particular bugs, CVE 2023 22518, and is rated, that vulnerability is rated at 9.1 out of 10. There isn't a great deal of information about the nature of that particular vulnerability or how it can facilitate data loss, but it has been shown that it could be. Simple fix involves upgrading. There are upgrades to versions 7, 8, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, and 8.6 all get upgrades to various sub-point levels. You may have been aware of the fact that this CVE was actually announced on October the 4th, and it allows abusers to access and control Confluence admin accounts. Interesting question around why has it taken almost a month to fix this? And the answer to that, coming from Atlassian, is that they are a cloud-first organization. So they have been fixing their cloud stuff before they were going to work on their server stuff. And also, support for the server version of Confluence will end in February next year. I personally think that's a pretty poor show. If you've spent the money and the product is in support, they should be patching it, and they should be patching it within a reasonable period of time. And I don't think, given the nature of this particular vulnerability, just under a month is actually okay. The workaround, by the way, if you haven't managed to patch this yet, is disconnect your Confluence server from the internet or restrict access to only trusted sources, which I'm sure is trivial for most organizations to do. Not. So, yes, sarcasm is never becoming. So, yeah, if you're running server versions of Confluence, definitely look for the patches. They are available now. If you are using the cloud version, you apparently don't have anything to worry about. Canada, the Canadian government has banned WeChat and Kaspersky on government phones. So there is an ongoing debate around whether certain apps are actually safe to have on devices that hold sensitive information. There was, I'm sure we'll remember relatively recently, a hoo-ha about TikTok, which, by the way, broadly agree with the thoughts that it is probably as much to do with surveillance as it is to do with dance videos. But so WeChat is a Chinese messaging app, and we do know that Chinese companies, even private companies, are bound by law to provide any information that they're asked for by Chinese security authorities. The Russian antivirus platform Kaspersky, I don't know. I don't know how closely tied Kaspersky actually is to Russian intelligence or Russian security forces. I used to think it wasn't very closely tied, but I think there's anecdotal evidence that just the fact that it's Russian means it probably is or could be subverted to provide information to the Russian security forces. So, yeah, so Canada's banned them both on government phones. No breaches have been actually identified, but it's a risk-based move. They've also, February this year, they did ban TikTok, and interestingly, in the US, Joe Biden revoked Donald Trump's executive order banning TikTok and WeChat from US markets, which I don't know. I mean, you say what you like about Trump. I think he possibly had either good advice or reasonable insight for once onto things that may not be good. Huawei has also been recently, the last year or so, has been doing battle with Canada over senior executives and so on and so forth. So there is at the moment there is an increasing realization that the governments in parts of the world that don't see the West as a force for good and a model to emulate are busily looking for ways to subvert and disrupt and so on and so forth. Things going on in the West, which is relatively easy if you have got a toehold into social media. Hence the fact that all this stuff now needs to be thought of very carefully. Ottawa, the Canadian government, has accused China of meddling in elections, attempted intimidation of MPs, and so on and so forth. So, I think it is something that we all will learn to live with. But maybe the moral of this story is actually do think about who owns the company that runs the apps or provides the apps that run on your phone. And then finally, from me today, an interesting article I came across on Security Week. The American SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, has filed charges against SolarWinds and its CISO, Timothy Brown, alleging that the software company misled investors about its cybersecurity practices and known risks. So, there is, I think, some truth behind what appears to be being said here. That SolarWinds were aware and had had reports saying that their cybersecurity posture was not strong, and this was around the time that they floated. So. Around the time of the initial public offering IPO, when the company was floated on the stock market. The subsequent Russian-linked threat actors breaching the SolarWare systems in 2019 or earlier massively impacted the share price of SolarWinds. Therefore, if SolarWinds were aware that they were at risk, but didn't address that risk or present that risk to investors, that could be considered fraud. So, yeah, I think this is a very interesting article. So, an internal report from around that time did state, from an engineer, did state that they were concerned about the risks of systems, that the systems were potentially at risk of compromise, and I think specifically the remote access setup was rated as not very secure, and it was pointed out at the time that exploiting the vulnerabilities in the remote access system could lead to major reputational and financial loss for the company. It is alleged that the CISO, Timothy Brown, ignored that advice, and then therefore was is guilty of withholding information from investors that was material to the IPO. So there we go. What's the story of this? Well, the message behind this one is either don't ask your security people whether you're secure or not, or alternatively, I'm not entirely sure though that what is it? Feasible deniability or whatever the thing is called would really work under these circumstances. Or more accurately, if your security team or your engineering team or whoever it is are saying, actually, we have an insecure part of our system, listen to them and do something about it. Reputational risk leading to, reputational damage leading to financial loss is probably, I think, the most damaging aspects of cybercrime these days. So, yeah, it's all right. You get hit by ransomware, fine. You could pay off the or not the ransomware team. You may or may not get your systems back, but in the eyes of your customers, unless you handle the situation really well, it's going to be difficult to, you're going to lose some people and you're going to dent their confidence. It'll take a long time to come back. Where it's something like, SolarWinds, which led to major global breaches of systems all around the world. Quite frankly, surprised they're still in business, but there we go. That's the way it is at the moment. So yeah, take your security reports seriously, and it's not all about penetration testing, by the way. Actually doing a risk-based assessment is important, and understanding your cyber maturity is very important, because there are things that will not be picked up by a purely technical penetration test, or they might be, but they may not be relevant in the future, or maybe new things coming through. But understanding your security maturity and understanding your threat landscape is really important, and then acting on this stuff. If you sit on it, the risk is yours. That is all from me for today. Hope you have a good Halloween, and I will speak to you all tomorrow morning.